Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. I am your part one co-host of two. I am Dr. Thomas, and we have
Dr. Fishta.
he's been in Florida, so he's like we're
Yes.
walking him back. He's all nice and tan. But we welcome you all to stream us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. So today on our show, we are going to be talking about all this racial injustice that's been going on, the affairs that's been happening, the riot that happened at the Capitol a few weeks ago. We have Dr. Matthew Glowiak, who will be joining us today. Unfortunately, State Rep Cynthia A. Johnson is unable to join us today due to being in session. So we wish her the best, but we would have loved to have her call, at least
Yep.
call in. So if you are listening and you get out of session in time, give us a call at 313-355-6018. We would love to have you join the conversation as well as our audience. If you would like to join the conversation, please give us a call 313-355-6018. So, Dr. Fishta, let me ask you a question. How have you been dealing with the social injustice that's been going on, from the police brutality to the riots at the Capitol to our own Michigan legislators being threatened?
Right. So it's very almost surreal
Hmm.
as is this actually happening right now? We saw not too long ago that Black Lives Matters. We had Mr. Floyd's unfortunate
George
death.
Floyd,
Yeah,
yes.
and uh, you know this is not new. What's new now is that we all have cameras,
In
uh,
social media.
social media. We're much more connected, and within the last year, social media has become a way of life
Yes.
due to COVID. So people are more tuned in, right? But as we know, this has been going on for, maybe what, a couple hundred of years, right? This is
Yeah.
just it's public now, and people have visuals, so to speak. Now, that is uh, very unfortunate passing of the man there, and many, many, many others, right?
Yes. There's hundreds.
However, what we're talking about here is a systematic racial uh, disparities that are
Hmm.
ingrained in system, right?
Yeah.
You start from the cities, you start from education system, you move on to criminal justice system or
Hmm.
justice system,
The
period,
justice
right?
system, yeah.
You look at the more recent numbers, right? You look at the deaths from COVID. In
Hmm.
Michigan, 14, 15% of our population is African American. 40% of deaths in Michigan are African American. What is going on with that? And this
Exactly.
virus knows no color whatsoever, right?
No, none at all.
So there you go. There's your something to look into. Now, again, the microscope is there, and my hope is that with recent changes that we can see a meaningful change in some way. Now, this change has been coming, right? We had the 60s, we had the huge civil liberties movements and so forth, but they went that far, right? It's up
Right.
to this generation now to move a step forward and hand that over to the next
Right.
generation,
And
right?
to raise the bar and
That's
that
correct.
status quo that definitely needs to be dismantled. Speaking as a Black woman and the disparities of my own community, it really stems, like you said, over 100 years, over 400
Yep.
years. So
Yep.
we're talking about not just one generation, but multiple
Yep.
generations of families
Yep.
that are being affected by this systemic racism. And even to the point where, I mean, for me, it just never has made sense for an individual to hate someone just because of the color of their skin. That has never resonated with me as a reason for someone to hate. I mean, and really hate someone to the point that they want to kill them. That to me is extreme, especially being in the mental health field. That kind of reaction for us in the mental health field mean that there's some type of mental illness there.
Yep. Yep. And keep in mind, this it's been, we had the closing of mental institutions, right, in the late 80s and 90s, which led into many folks from there being discriminated against, which they ended up.
Right. Do we have Dr. Glowiak joining us? Are you live with us, Dr. Glowiak?
Can you hear him? I can't.
Okay, well, we can see you, but guess
we know
what?
You're talking.
Yeah, but we can't hear a word that you're saying. Well, for our studio audience, I'm sorry, Dr. Gloria, can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell everyone who you are? Start off with whatever you want to start off with.
We'll let the engineers take that.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and unmute you from out of our studio audience. So let me key our engineer to make sure that we get you unmuted. But until
Looks
we
like
do,
they're working on it.
Yeah, they're working on it. So give us a little bit. Give us just a little bit more time. I love that background that you have, though, Dr. Gloria. You looking really nice and comfortable. And I know you're there in Chicago.
You should be good now.
Yes, it says the host is unmuted my microphone. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give the engineers a little time. They're working on it in the background.
Yeah, just give us a few seconds, and then we will let you know when we can actually hear you. But just stick with us for a little bit. But you're looking great. Everyone can see you, okay?
Well, thank you. Let me know when you can hear me. It does say I'm unmuted if you heard that.
So... This is real. I love technology. You just never know what's going to happen with it, right?
My IT skills are you turn it off and you turn it back on, and it usually works. And that's as far as it goes. So
sometimes you have to take the battery out, though, right?
That's right. Yeah, they didn't even make them that way. The laptops. You can't even. I looked for battery in the recent one, and I'm like, there's no battery. Just unplug it.
Oh wow!
So.
Check one.
Let me ask you, Dr. Fishta, when you live in Lake Orion,
yep,
which is upper part or northern part of Michigan,
yep,
and in your community, how do you see Black and brown people being treated differently?
I personally don't. Lake Orion is in northern Oakland County. And, from what I see in my neighborhood with African American families, I don't hear people directly discriminating against them. However, I must tell you personally that, we have a small lake there, neighborhood lake.
Oh, yeah, I know. I've been on your lake.
I have, correct, right? I've been, as I told you, in the past, I've been pulled over there in all my years there twice. And it happened that both of those 2 times out of, maybe 1,000 times I've been out in a lake, that I happened to be hanging out with African-American friends. And I don't know if that's a coincidence. It's the same boat driver all times. And for things that I didn't even get a ticket because there was no reason for me being pulled over, which I felt it was based on some form of discrimination because, I was there yesterday, the day before, it just happened on that day that I got pulled over on a lake. And I think that's to get my point across is that I think we have a lot of work to do.
Dr. Gloria, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now? It says that you should be able to.
I can't hear you, but go ahead ahead, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. Maybe they can hear you on the other end, but I can't hear you in our speaker. So go ahead.
Okay, well, hopefully it's working. It does show me that the producer unmuted me, so hopefully everyone can hear me here. My name is Dr. Matt Gloviak. I reside in Bolingbrook, Illinois, which is about 25 miles southwest of the city of Chicago. Currently full-time faculty with Southern New Hampshire University, working in the Master's Mental Health Counseling field there. I do some contributing faculty with Walden University and Yorkville University as well. Very, very active in the field. Beyond the work that I do in terms of teaching as a professor, I also co-owned a private practice in the Chicago Metropolitan for the past 6 years. I also do many presentations. I like to get published, write a bunch of different articles, both in the professional journals as well as in some of the different media forms that we have. I also have a local mental health TV show named Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt here in Bolingbrook, Illinois. So just keeping very active. And one of the reasons I wanted to be here today is, like many of you, you have been very touched by everything that's been going on in our society over the past year here. Talking about a lot of a dueling pandemic, one part of it being COVID-19 and the other part of it, being the civil unrest. And, I was able to hear some of what you were saying earlier. And, a lot of people now they're starting to see these different things in media and believe that it was never there before. Well, now it's just become more transparent. As more people have phones that have cameras on them, more people are on social media, we're starting to actually see the things that have been happening this entire time. So it's great that we're calling attention to it, but there's much more that needs to be done. And this didn't just spontaneously come out of nowhere. And I think the two of you articulated that quite well as I was coming on. We were figuring out these little technical issues.
I know, right? So, Dr. Gloviak, we are experiencing this social injustice at such a rapid rate now, and because of social media. And I know that you and I talked before about what happened at the Capitol with the riot. Can you tell us your thoughts and your feelings as a white male? How did that impact your life? And you have small children as well, minor children, under the age of 8. So how does that impact you and how you even rear your children?
That's a great question. I mean, this year has impacted me significantly. The Capitol riots were kind of the icing on the cake, if you will. Seeing just the point that humanity can get to and something that's been spawned by hate, misinformation, and it's very, very unsettling. And as you said, I'm a father, just had, our third child, Mallory was born in October. So she came in, to the middle of all this. And I think that it is extremely disturbing that people can get to this type of level. Being a white individual myself, and it's kind of interesting. I grew up in a very diverse community, live in the same town I grew up in now, so it's still very diverse, and had a lot of blinders on and didn't really realize that racism was a thing. To a great extent, I had to be educated on it, start to meet people from different areas of the country, different areas of the world to learn a lot more about it. And the thing is that, when you're not personally exposed to this all of the time, it's easy to put the blinders on, not even realize, this type of thing is going on. But with it in front of us so often now, it's literally in our face. You go to your Facebook, people have posts. You go to your LinkedIn, people are posting about it on TV nonstop. And I had a similar experience the day of the Capitol riots. I was sitting downstairs and I was doing my work. I'm working from home right now while doing my instruction. And I had the news on and I was starting to see everything unfold. And to be completely honest with you, it does take a lot to shake me. Personally, I've worked with hundreds of different clients who've shared very sad stories. I come in, I talk about racism and other diversity topics and so on. And it's fairly easy for me to keep my composure at this point, if you will. But like something with that just really unsettled me. And, it really bothers me because we have a lot of talk about partisanship and things like that, Republicans versus Democrats and so on. But this is a human rights issue.
Exactly.
I do think that it's possible that somebody could be whatever political affiliation you want, whatever religion you want, and still have the capacity to treat other people the way that they should be treated. And that's what I think really needs to be understood here, is this is a human rights issue. It's not a political issue. So regardless of what side you're on, when you're making it all about the politics, we're missing the big picture.
And I think you bring up a very good point, because oftentimes we do associate our political affiliation with ideology and the things that we actually believe in, what's right, what's wrong. And we're seeing that we're being led more by our party affiliation, more so than our own values and morals. Do you see that as well, Dr. Glowiak?
Oh, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, and think about it. When you're affiliated with a particular group, you feel very strongly about it. You have this sense of camaraderie with it. You want to believe that everything that's being told to you is correct. You know, it's very hard to be able to separate that out, because it's like, okay, we have a president. He's our president. If you're one who voted for him, you want to believe that everything he's saying is right. And then we have the opposite end. We have the group of people who didn't vote for him. Everything he says is wrong. And, the reality is that everything's in the middle, and that's what we have to figure out here is a human rights part. So if people could remove that, I think it'll be a lot easier to see the issue for what it is. You still can be a Republican and vote Republican and do Republican things while still tending to human rights. And the same for whatever other type of political affiliation that you have. And that's what's going to be really important here. So we have to be able to open our minds to what is going on, educate ourselves on the topic, and honestly immerse yourself, speak to other people who've had these experiences, participate in listening to different live streams like this, going on, reading the books, and so on.
Right, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Please stream. We are actually streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Right now we have on the with us via satellite Dr. Matthew Glowiak, who is a counselor educator at Southern New Hampshire University, as well as the owner of his own private practice in Chicago, Illinois, or in the Chicago, Illinois area. Because I think you're actually not in Chicago, right? You're like part of the suburb.
Yeah, I live in the suburbs of the Chicago area, and actually, yeah. So I ended up stepping away from the practice about May or so, but yeah, still up running, doing well, and all that good stuff. I'm still doing my counseling and everything that comes along with it.
Oh, I know. You're like super busy. I told you I'm going to get you a cape because Dr. Glowiak, Dr. Fishta, let me tell you. When I first met Dr. Glowiak, he was in a doctoral program. He was presenting his dissertation topic when I originally met him, and he fascinated me with his presentation. And then I got to know him by being, we are both members of Chi Sigma Iota Omega Zeta chapter from Walden. So he was the president-elect, and I was a regional chair at the time. And we just kind of like followed each other. He became president of the chapter. I became president the next year. He did some publishing things. I did some publishing things. We presented together. I'm watching his children grow up now.
It's happening quickly too.
Yes. And this is someone that I can actually call and get advice from. Just like I call and you and I, we have conversations and mull over ideas. I do the same with Dr. Glowiak, and it's a blessing that we both teach at Southern New Hampshire University, because I'll call him like, hey, Matt, let me ask you a question.
Confused, right? The portal's down. What do I do?
Exactly. So
Dr. Glowiak, I want to ask you, given that you have small children and given that you have clinical experience, educational, and so forth, what can people tell their children about what has happened and what is happening now? We still have the trial at Senate. You have the House there possibly doing certain actions against certain members because of various reasons. But we try to teach our children our civics, our capital. We take our children there, right? And then we're proud of that. How do you even start what do you tell your children?
Well, I think the most important thing that you really have to do is role model the behavior you want your children to follow. So act in accordance. If you want to be an anti-racist person and have anti-racist children, you have to act in an anti-racist manner. And you do have to adjust the conversation depending on the age of your children. So I've got a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and now a about to be 4 months old here in a couple of days. But when we have the conversation, talking to them about, there are people who come from different places, who have different skin color and so on, but all of these people are unique. All these people are lovable. All these people are worthy, and you need to treat all of them with the same type of respect that you would like to be treated with. And that's really been something that's gone a long way. Now, in my family, the family dynamic is quite diverse. For example, my wife, her sister, she has, a black daughter. And, she's always over. We're very close. She's a cousin. She's in her mid-20s. She teaches special education. Really great example. So she'll come over with her friends. We gets an example of, African-American population with our niece. My sister, she married into a Hispanic family, a very large Mexican family in the area, own a chain of Mexican restaurants. We're always at parties together, hanging out together, having a really great time. And then there's more diversity as you span out through the rest of my family. So just really setting that example is important. Even the types of TV shows that children are watching, educational programs such as Sesame Street, really great. Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, talking about diversity. These types of things really broach a topic. And although, it might not necessarily have people of different skin colors and religions on there, maybe they have monsters, like different monsters and aliens who look a little bit different, and show them all working together and things like that. And I think that's really what it needs to be. So, it's one thing to have a conversation here and there talking about it, racism's out there, it's a bad thing, don't be racist, love everybody. But it's something else to actually live in accordance with it. Now, one thing we want to avoid, which I'm sure we probably would have touched upon at some point during this anyway, is really doing the colorblind thing. And that's something that I will say, I was definitely a perpetrator of for many years in my life. So I would say, I'm 37 now, so more than half my life, I would say that I was the colorblind type of person. I don't see people of color. We're all the same. I love you all, and that's the way it goes. In theory, that is a good approach because it does remove some of the race tendencies and thoughts you might have, no overt acts of discrimination. But in doing that, we're denying our differences. I can't possibly celebrate your heritage without acknowledging your skin color. I can't possibly, empathize with the hardships that you've been through if I'm not acknowledging your skin color. And let's be real here. What's one of the first things we see when somebody walks in the room? We see skin color, we see gender. So to say that we don't is denying something that we actually experience. And to be completely honest, all of us do have some implicit bias. Some of us, make our life quest trying to work through it. Maybe we relieve ourselves of it. Maybe we don't. But at the very least, we do need to make those efforts. And it's important to acknowledge. And that's one of the issues with the colorblind type of idea. So living forward.
Excellent point. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I have a colleague that when we first met, that was one of the things that she would say. Oh, I'm colorblind. I don't see you. I don't see your color. I'm like, well, if you don't see my color, then are you saying that I'm invisible? Because if you look at me and you look at you, there's obviously a difference in our skin tone. There's, there is a difference. So for someone to say to a person of color that you don't see color, for us, that means that you don't see us. Mm-hmm. So that means we're invisible. So if we're invisible, nothing that we ever say or do will ever get heard. And things will never change if you don't see and acknowledge that there is a difference between us. And not saying that we're different because of our ideology or our morals, but there's just a difference in the color. And even within the Black community or the minority community, there's various shades,
subcultures.
Exactly. So you are just dismissing the person when you say that you don't see color.
Great point.
So I'm glad that you brought that point up, and it's really something that we need to reflect upon and be more aware when we are engaging with one another.
Well, and if I'm going to be completely, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I say, if I'm going to be completely blunt about it, I do believe that color blindness is taking the easy way out. It's essentially a cop out, because here it is. I don't need to acknowledge what it is I really feel. I don't need to actually sit and do the work to better myself. I don't need to consider ways to be able to be in alliance, so I just see everybody the same. This is that, but it couldn't be further from the reality. And I really appreciate the point that you made, in doing this. It's like, it is something that's there. We're dismissing you by not acknowledging it. So we really need to. It's important.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Gloyak, again, your wealth of knowledge is well noted here, as you described it, and we know. Now, we have a country that's divided, right? The world looks up to us, at least perceptually, right? In so many ways. And I think some of our flaws now are on the international arena, right? Visible. And here we are telling many other folks around the world what democracy is and all. How did we get here? This is not something that happens in vacuum. This has evolved for a long time to get to this point. Your thoughts? I want to hear your thoughts.
It's exactly like you said. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It's something that's been since the entire United States history. And even if we want to go before the birth of the United States, other nations throughout the world, various civilizations have had similar type of segregation, discrimination, and so on. It's just been part of a fact of humanity. I think for a long time, one of the things was the United States of America, given the lack of technology back then. And, we didn't have instant access to be able to stream things, share videos, give different reports, and so on. So things would happen and not everybody would know about it. Or even take a look at the American history books. I mean, look at all the falsehoods that are actually put in the American history books, things we intentionally don't teach our children, and so on. So you end up growing up not seeing that there's any type of issue, and it's not being communicated appropriately to other people. But now, with the technology that we have, something can happen, in one place, and it can get to the other end of the world in 5 seconds. And now everybody knows about it and everybody's sharing it. So I think one of the things with the United States of America, it is, for all intents and purposes, it is a very diverse country. And we have a lot of things that are very great about us. And democracy, when it's in the spirit it's intended to be, is something that should be celebrated. So there's a lot to really look up to. But I think at the same time, we had this kind of protective curtain over us where people weren't seeing the reality of what people were living. So then we would have immigrants, refugees, and so on come into the United States expecting to live the American dream, and bam, they would get slapped across the face with a harsh dose of reality. And just really now we can't hide it anymore.
Absolutely. So absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. And we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Periscope. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment. And please join our conversation by calling 313-355-6018. And we have with us Dr. Matthew Gloyak. I am so glad that you are joining us. Dr. Gloyak, I want to ask you, can you tell us the difference between being unaware of social injustice and racism versus white privilege?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the white privilege piece of it, because I do believe that there is some unawareness when it comes to white privilege. So if you want to define white privilege, it is an unearned privilege that you attain due to the color of your skin. That's simply what it is. White privilege in and of itself, it does not make you a bad person. Doesn't mean that you've necessarily done bad things or anything like that, but it's acknowledgement of an unearned privilege that you were born with simply based off the color of your skin. Now, it's one of those things that I do think in many ways that, we have to take a look at it. When we look at the demographics of the United States, it is majority white, and I've even had classroom assignments I've done with different students, and particularly in my diversity class. One student tell me she lived in a state that was 98.5% white. Now, I couldn't believe it. I live in a community, it's about, it's 30% African-American, 31% white, 32% Hispanic, and the rest other. It just really blew my mind. I ended up going and looking at the U.S. Census, and it was 98.7% actually white in an entire state. Now, if you're growing up in an area that's 98.7% plus white, and I would assume some of the communities are probably even 100% white if that's a state's demographic, it is really hard to understand what white privilege is, because you're going about, you're living your life, you're doing your thing, and there's nobody around you to show you to the contrast. Now, taking it further, taking a look at some of the, big corporations, many of the Fortune 500, 100 companies run by white CEOs. A lot of the major broadcasting companies are run by white CEOs. A lot of the media places, again, white CEOs. So really, it's going to be hard to be able to get the information you need to become aware unless you know that you're unaware, if that makes any sense. It's almost like you have to be told that you're unaware of this to be able to go out and do something, because if I live in a community that everybody is white and I go about my life and I know nothing about racism, I turn on the TV, the media, it's all white people, and then the media they do show on people of color is always something negative, bad, then, okay, well, that's going to completely frame my image and I don't know anything else. I heard a really great quote recently when I was watching a movie on racial justice, and it was talking about, white folks, and this is a great part of white privilege too, and something I hope people do take away. White folks with white privilege have the luxury of not having to think about racism because it doesn't impact them on a daily basis. We have the luxury to not think about it because it doesn't impact us on a daily basis. We're not subject to microaggressions all the time. It's likely that if there are two qualified candidates, one's a person of color, one's white, the white person's likely going to get it. And then we take a look further and say, oh, there's plenty of, famous Black people who've made it, who are doing really well. Look at Oprah Winfrey, look at Michael Jordan, people like that. Okay, they did, but this is the few and far between. When we really do take a look at the demographics in this country, there's an overwhelming majority of white people are successful. And this has happened due to years of systemic oppression that's been going on. It's hard to get ahead when you're born in life 5 steps behind. So with that, white privilege is something that everybody has, whether you're aware of it or unaware of it, it's something that you have. So even being somebody, and I would say I still have a longer ways to go in my journey with all of this as well. I have much more to learn. I realize that it's something I want to work on for the rest of my life. But even if I do this, and even if I somehow, by a miracle, get rid of my implicit bias, I still have white privilege. I can't get rid of it. It's there, So I think that that's really the big difference here. So one of the big pushes that we have to do right now with, this radio show we're doing right here, everything else that's out there, is make people aware of it. But also realize there's going to be a lot of discomfort around that, because some of the things that you take for granted, especially as a white person, if you are an empathic individual who really wants to see change, be an anti-racist, be an ally, and you take a look in, I'm telling you, some of the stuff that you feel, that you experience, is going to be quite jarring. It's going to be hard on you emotionally.
Absolutely. 1 second. Caller, you are in session with Dr. T and Dr. Fishta. What's on your mind?
This is Ishmael Terry.
Hi, Ishmael Terry. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm very proud of your show, and I'm the first time, caller in, and but it's not the first time I listen to your show. Social inequity or social injustice is a menacing point in our American dream. People have to wake up to the idea that we're all built on the same planet, and that we have the same causes and the same identities. But we need to start to look at how we manufacture a different train of ideology in our communities. Until we figure that out, it's great that we're all having this conversation about what injustice really looks like, but that portion needs to be recognized. That's the real elephant in the room. And so we need to make a considerate effort to talk about those things, because we know that finances and fair housing markets and others play a role in social economic, inequality. Excuse me. And so
Absolutely.
we need to stabilize that first, and that will then tackle racism and anti-racism as a whole, because it's built on classism.
I am so glad that you brought that into the conversation, Ishmael. You are very much so on point. And even looking at the the systematic entities that are in place that stop people of color from actually purchasing homes within a certain neighborhood. We know that as redlining. And it's still being practiced today.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm glad that you bring that into the conversation. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask Dr. Glowiak, Ishmael?
Yeah. So, Doc, thank you for joining, Dr. Ian. What is your train of thought? What is your idea about social economics and social inequality? What is your focus point on how we can make a stronger impact?
Good question. Thank you for that.
Well, I mean, there need to be some significant adjustments. Absolutely. Okay, so I opened up earlier saying that I live about 25 miles southwest of the city of Chicago. You can go out to Chicago and you can get pretty much any walk of life that you would literally want to see. I mean, you have the richer than the rich, people living in high rises, driving $300,000 cars, and so on. And then I can go 2 blocks down the street and see the complete opposite. And this is really how systemic racism is tied into the economy, is that we have individuals who are living, having a hard time getting the good job. So, people of color are oftentimes left having to take the minimum wage type job. And these minimum wage type jobs don't come with any benefits. So now you don't have health insurance, vision insurance, dental, any of this type of stuff. And the money that you're receiving is so low, you oftentimes have to work 2-3 jobs. Now, at that point, if you're a single parent working 2-3 jobs, how are you possibly taking care of your kids? Now your kids are at home taking care of themselves, seeing the struggle that you're living. And this is when, things start to really become compromised and stuff like that. So what do the children do? The family doesn't have money. They resort to maybe joining a gang. It's either be in the gang and, be protected. Don't join the gang, get beat up. And while they're doing that, they're having to sell drugs to be able to get the money, to be able to take care of the house, all the while going to a school in a neighborhood where, again, they could get beat up on the way to school. They're actually using textbooks. They're outdated, about 15 years old, maybe don't even have the technology. There's no grant funding coming into the school. None of the government taxes are being expended in there. And it just keeps making it harder and harder and harder to get ahead. When you don't have the resources, and many of the students are going to high school and they're not seeing other people receiving accolades or going to college, they start to feel hopeless. It's like, well, if nobody else is gone, how am I going to go? I'm not going to get out of this. And the cycle continues to repeat itself. And it's so ridiculous. Even in the middle of the 1900s, I mean, the government would literally, we would have legislators drawing a line in certain neighborhoods, dividing them out, where the wealthier would receive even more tax allocated funds to go into these schools, while the ones that were struggling in poverty were receiving even less. They would take away from these populations and give it to the more affluent ones. So that's a major problem. And this is why it's very
still happening today. This is one of the major issues, especially from the Black community. We keep fighting for the same shit. It's nothing that has changed. It's the same thing. Access to affordable housing, proper education for our children, making sure that we have grocery stores in our neighborhoods in which have healthy food, instead of having a liquor store on every other corner, having a gas station on every other corner. These are not the things that are needed within the community to make it thrive. We need viable options. We need grocery stores. We need clothing stores. We need schools. We don't need more schools to close as we have here in Detroit. We need more schools to be open. We need safe communities so our children can walk to school and not fear that they're going to be snatched up, or that they have to walk by a drug house, or 5 or 6 abandoned homes that are burnt down. That's not what the community needs.
And the major problem here, which Dr. Gloyak alluded on, is this funding for education, right? Because we look at the quality of education in majority or most of city of Detroit, and you look at the suburbs, these kids, once they're out of high school, they're comparing at state level or national level, right? And they're doomed to fail from there.
Exactly. Because most of our children that are actually in high school, I don't know if many people are aware of this. A few years ago, a group of Detroit high school graduates went to court to petition to have a quality education, because here in Michigan, it states that all children are entitled to go to school. But it does not say in there that they are entitled to a quality education. So they actually won that case. So hopefully now, even with our new school board that we just have coming in, that these issues are actually going to be addressed so that our children can be competitive when they get to college, if they decide to go to college or take on some type of trade. Because we know not all kids are want to go to college, nor are they prepared to go to college, nor do they want to. So trades are a good option as well. So even owning your own business. I mean, come on. So how many millionaires do we have out here that didn't even go to college? But we need to look at each state, or no, just actually on the federal level. And I'm going to ask Ishmael to chime in here, because I'm going to introduce him a little bit, but he's worked with state legislators, even worked during the Obama administration. Actually, Ishmael, do you want to give a little blurb about your legislative history?
Yeah, I'm sure. So I've had the blessing to serve as chief of staff in the Michigan House of Representatives during the Granholm era, as well as Fred Durhall Jr. and George Cushionberry Jr.
Shout out to Fred Durhall.
Right, to the crew, to the old crew, to the Granholm and all of them back in them days. I've also served as the legislative policy director recently up there in the Michigan House of Representatives.
And then you also are the owner of All for One nonprofit.
I'm so sorry trying to work that in. Well, we're All for One. We've been recognized by PBS for the American Graduate Award for the programs that we do in the school districts throughout the states. So we've been busy, but my focus point is always trying to figure out how to make legislative policies fit the needs of where the residents are going in the future. Never into what's going on now, but what's going to impact 20 years later.
Absolutely.
So, Ishmael, I can't help but to ask you, having been around Lansing in Granholm's days, and after that administration was gone, we had a major issue, and I don't know how much Dr. Gloyak knows about City of Flint and the water issue, which made it on national, obviously, and international news, really. I imagine you're pissed off, and you know a thing or two about that, and there's been some recent developments there. And I can't help it, but that happened to be predominantly a black populated city, right?
Correct. So you have on the south side of Flint, you have you have truly the classism of the greatness. So on the south side of Flint, that's really over the overpass going towards University of Michigan, Flint, Mott, and all of them. That is the predominantly poorest neighborhoods, right? And so and then on the northern side, of course, that's where all of the small businesses and things of that nature is growing, right? So that fracture has been sitting there for years. But when I was in the legislating, of course, we look at places like Benton Harbor, Flint, Pontiac, Saginaw, Detroit, areas that's predominantly black. We see that the population has decreased by 15 to maybe sometimes 30%. Mm-hmm. So within that, you try to mobilize policies, or you try to mobilize funding and appropriation, because that's when I was with Fred and Cushenberry and them. I had the blessing to be involved in the appropriation committees. So you learn how to maneuver committees, and also the speaker at that time was Andy Dillon, and maneuvering funding, and Michael Bishop, who was the Republican side, just mobilizing funding and resources towards those more suburban areas, but then also creating a rainy day fund or a populating fund that will go into those major hard-hit areas. Now, sometimes when you as a legislator, you're making harsh decisions, you're making decisions on what funding is going to what area first. And so since even though the smaller suburban villages and townships and cities are outpopulated even by the city of Detroit, because we know that the city of Detroit is vastly larger than the others. Representation is the key on how you mobilize funding towards those hard-hit areas like Flint. So because you had lack of, and then the grand bargaining, and then the understanding that, did not want to go into DWSD and wanted to put more money into that. That's what made them make the decision under Snyder and others, Mr. Ely and them, to make a decision to take the money of lesser of the evil and pay into DWSD system, and then go right into the river, which entail cause a chain reaction, as you know. So those was only in the decision of we can give less to that area than we could if we go across the northern portion of Flint and impact those residents. And hopefully Mayor Neely is working due diligently to create a different avenue in that portion of Flint, because that's when you see the difference. When you go south part of Flint, you really start seeing the real major difference. A lot of closed down commercial properties, residential areas are vast and far few, and you have residents who are trying to hold it together with a Band-Aid, and looking for legislators like myself to come in. I did a tour of the area. They asked me to come in and visit, and it's the same. It's remarkably the same as Detroit, in stronger, more dense populations like the Midtown, downtown area, even in some areas like Green Acres, Sherwood Forest, and Palmer Wood, you're going to put more access and resource towards them. The small number, probably 30 to 40%, is going into Rosedale Park, and south and north up towards Greenfield. Okay. And that's as well as in Plymouth, going towards Redford and the Cody area, the stretch. You putting more money and access to them because those populations are, deemed to be more prevalent. And so when you go outside of those areas, certain areas like Sub Aviation, who's over there towards retirement, there's a gray area that you're going to put more resources towards them.
Thank you, Ishmael.
That's not. I know it's not fair, but that as a legislator, you're looking at, okay, I'm losing population, so how do I consolidate those populations to build out a stronger city or village or township?
Right.
And
Ishmael,
that's
thank
what
you very much for calling in to the show. And we're going to have you come into the studio with us to have a deeper conversation. But I would love, we really enjoyed this conversation.
Ishmael, on a final note, before you go, we need dollars for teachers, schools, affordable housing, not projects, affordable housing, and we need to help that mother with children who's doing her best to raise the children. That's
And
what
that
we need in
single
our city.
father.
And single fathers, yes.
Yeah. Well, how about that? My little sister, or my big sister, however you want to call her, my family. She set up a date for me to come in, and I will come.
You got
Okay.
it. Perfect. Okay. Thank you
All
so
right.
much for calling
Love
in.
you,
Yeah.
Ish.
Love you too.
So, Dr. Glowiak, so you heard some of the challenges that we have here in the state of Michigan with the educational system, even redistricting our community. What do you see, or do you see any commonality that's here in Michigan that's also taking place in Illinois?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. You can see it around. And I would like to take a moment to thank Ishmael for all the insights and everything shared. It was really great hearing, all the great work he's doing and a little bit more about your area. But it's definitely something that's not unique to Michigan. As we were talking about Flint, Michigan for a moment and the water crisis, I was thinking about, another concept that's recently surfaced. Again, something that's been around for a long time, but now we've labeled it, environmental racism, environmental discrimination. In an example like that, we see these major manufacturers are dumping toxic waste, into the middle of our lakes, streams, rivers, and so on. And as this is happening, what's the government response? It's like, oh, we're going to fine you $10,000 a day until you clean this up, and it's no longer going in there. Okay, we're fining them $10,000 a day. Great, but they're making $15 million a day dumping the waste into an area that people are living, and we want them to be healthy and so on. So it's just really backward. And I love how Ishmael said that the representation piece is ever so important. People really do need to band together and stand up for what's right. And we need to do it peacefully, need to do it intentionally, and need to do it consistently. You have to continue to stand up, because if you don't, same things are going to continue happening. But yes, absolutely, in the state of Illinois, you can see these types of things. Kind of the example I gave a little bit ago. I live about 25 miles away from the city. I'm in a middle-class suburb. Kind of the further you get out, more rural, depending what direction you go, you may see less affluent areas. But in the city itself, literally night and day difference, depending on what side of the street that you're on. But this is also, it's happening with the schools. It is happening with, different mental health service providers and things like that. My specialty is addictions. My first full-time job was at a methadone clinic working opioid use disorder. Saw a bunch of clients with heroin addiction, intravenous use, and even trying to get a clinic like that for medically assisted treatment in some neighborhoods. Some places wanted to reject it. Some places just couldn't afford it. But this is a real need that extends beyond affluency, because it's not, the type of issue that's necessarily specific to a particular color. We know opiates, drugs, they have no demographic boundaries, yet we have resistance all over the place that's going on. And it just doesn't make any sense how one district to the next, we could see one school that's huge, tons of activities, top-notch teachers getting paid really well. They have all the resources.
I could not agree with you more, Dr. Glowiak, and we're going to have you come back in. But this concludes our session for today, and we were so glad to have you again,
Thank
Dr.
you so
Matthew
much, Dr.
Glowiak, joining the conversation.
Can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
I have to say this because I love your little introduction. I feel very cool being on the coolest radio talk show in Detroit. I just love the way you said that. I wanted to say I feel cool being on the coolest station, so thank you.
You got it.
That's
We'd love to have you back.
All right.
I would love to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tune in next week and each and every Thursday for your dose of In Session on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest radio station in the world.